I was 16 when I discovered the hidden trapdoor in our basement. I was 17 when I picked the lock open, fleeing moments later from the ghastly moans echoing from the darkness of the abyssal shaft below. I was 18 when I finally asked my dad about it. I was told to mind my own business and stay the hell out of the basement, or I would fast end up there myself. I had no reason to doubt him. He had done worse several times over. That day, I was 25. My dad was working a late shift and he had no idea I drove all the way back to that godforsaken place in the middle of the night, haunted by those eerie sounds that I had heard so many years ago. He told me that it was probably cats, or rats, or both, but I knew that it wasn't. I could recognize the faint sobbing of a human voice any time. I picked the day carefully. My dad was a creature of utter habit, and I knew that he would hit the bar as soon as his shift ended. That would give me 5 or 6 hours at least, more than enough time. I pulled into the driveway under the cover of dusk, my headlights off, my engine on idle. I had packed a bag with everything I needed to get in and out swiftly, while collecting all the evidence I needed to get that bastard locked up for life. I stood idly on the porch, staring at the front door for what felt like ages. There were no lights, no movement, and no sounds. I was alone. I bit my lip anxiously, and I looked around one final time before I cracked the door open with my crowbar. A musty scent filling my nostrils as I stepped into the house brought back memories that I would rather soon forget. I hadn't set foot in that place since I graduated college, nor did I originally intend to ever return. I strongly believe my dad felt the same way. He turned 50 last year and didn't even invite me to his obnoxiously grandiose party. I had to learn of it from my aunts. Truth be told, I was glad. I couldn't stand my family on my father's side. A party filled with the hateful cretins would be far too much for me to handle. I even struggled being in the same room as my dad for more than an hour at a time. I shook my head to regain my composure at this point, the vivid recollections leaving me more or less paralyzed. I turned on my flashlight and I quickly browsed the dirty contents of the first floor. Nothing had changed since my last visit, and everything was a mess as per usual. Shabby clothes, shoddy boots, dirty dishes, and empty liquor bottles. A thick carpet of dust. The place had it all. It had come to a stage where you would struggle to tell the different rooms apart. Was this the kitchen, the living room, the bathroom? Thankfully, I felt no need to linger. I knew exactly where I was going. The door to the basement was at the end of the cramped hallway, and I quickly reoriented myself and I made my way to it. The door opened with a silent creak, and I started the descent as stealthily as I could manage given the circumstances. The stairs dangerously ramshackle and the old wood cracking disconcertingly under the weight of each step. I hadn't been down here for 5 years now, probably closer to a decade, and I tried my best to mentally picture how it used to look. I could remember accompanying my mom down here before she left us, but back then, things were a bit more organized. Now everything was in a state of complete chaos. It looked like my dad had gone completely berserk down there, smashing anything and everything to bits. There wasn't a single piece of furniture left standing, and glass shards littered the concrete floor. I minded my steps as I gently made my way to the middle of the room. I threw the rugged carpet aside, revealing the ominous trapdoor beneath. I took a deep breath, terrified of the thought of what I might find down there in the darkness, before I grabbed the rusty handle and I pulled it open. I winced involuntarily from the stale smell filling the room as I stared into the black hole below. I fumbled blindly around the opening, quickly reorganizing the outlines of a ladder leading down. Without thinking twice, I started the slow climb down into the unknown, my heart beating faster for each awkward step, my body rapidly filling with adrenaline. Once in a while I would pause, listening intently for any sign of life, but hearing nothing, I would quickly continue. I don't know how long it took me to reach the bottom, but it felt like minutes. When my right foot finally touched the ground, I felt cold shivers run up and down my spine. The first thing I noticed was the shape and size of the room. It seemed way too large, way too wide, and way too spherical in geometry to have been haphazardly dug out and built in. This was definitely planned and constructed with great skill. It would have taken a single individual years, even decades, to pull this off. I couldn't see much from my current position, but I could gather that much. The second thing that I noticed was the smell. It wasn't just a stench, it was something far more putrid, like rot or bile, only worse. I desperately tried to avoid gagging, but it soon became too much. Before long, my dinner came back up, landing disgustingly on the floor with an audible splash. I sat down briefly to regain control of my faltering stomach, but realized that I was wasting time. I had to get a hold of myself and do what I came here to do. I silently edged my way from the isolated shaft out into what appeared to be a large circular chamber. The eerie pale light from my torch barely bright enough for me to accurately identify anything. Without quite knowing where I was going, I decided the best course of action was to walk to the approximate center of the spacious room, to get a clearer idea of what exactly was down here. I dreaded what I would find. I loathed the possibilities. I hated that even though I wanted so badly to just leave, I simply couldn't. I had to know. I needed to know this more than I needed anything in my life. With a trembling hand, I let my flashlight wander across the aging brick walls. I can't recall what my initial reaction was, but I suppose that it was shock. It has that special quality of instant life-threatening terror mixed with an overdose of adrenaline that I believe might briefly wipe your short-term memory. What I do remember is lying on the floor looking up at the glass window. No, not a window. Cell. A glass cell. And it wasn't the only one. All in all, I could count 5 of the sinister boxes installed into the walls around the room. While 5 glass cells might for some be frightening enough, they weren't the sole reason I was suddenly sprawling on the cold brick floor. It was the inhabitants of the horrid, ethereal prisons that really pushed me over the edge. I stumbled to my feet, eyes fixed on the closest cell, the image of what I had first seen in there slowly coming back to me. The cell was small, maybe 7 by 7 feet, but it was just wide enough to cram a bed in, leaving just little room to perform surgical procedures. I say that because that's exactly what it looked like. The bed wasn't so much a bed as it was a makeshift operating table. The leather straps connected to it pulled tightly around the young man's legs and hands. The man appeared unconscious, and for that, at least, I was thankful. Had he been awake, he would have been wailing in pain from the horrible incisions inflicted upon him. I had to cover my mouth to avoid screaming myself. The sight of the man's mutilated face enough to send me stumbling backwards. I won't bother trying to depict the nature of it. I couldn't even if I wanted to. It was too atrocious. Just too loathsome. I staggered back, my mind now in complete turmoil. I couldn't understand it. What the hell was going on here? Who was that man? And why was my father doing this? How long had this been going on for? All questions I knew I had no way of answering, yet they just kept echoing in my head. I stood there gasping for air, my entire being trembling uncontrollably. Sure, I had suspicions. I knew something was down here. But this is something else. After standing there blinking sheepishly for minutes, I finally came to my senses and I realized that I had to do something. I couldn't just loiter down here indefinitely. I also remembered something else that had slipped my mind. There were still 4 cells left for me to explore. I dreaded the thought of it, but I knew that I had to do it. I anxiously walked to the next cell, only to be greeted by more of the same horror. Another man, the same age by the looks of it, strapped down to one of those horrid operating tables. There were deep surgical cuts on each one of his feet, the wound left open too long, the black tissue a sure sign of necrosis. I had to turn my head away instantly, as I felt what was left of my dinner about to resurface. The next cell was empty. I sighed in relief, hoping that would be the case with the remaining ones as well. And sure enough, the one after that was empty too. Maybe that was the end of it. Maybe I didn't have to face yet another one of those poor tormented souls. But as my light illuminated the next one, my stomach turned and I dropped to the ground, gasping for air again. It was another young man, completely covered by deep, hideous cuts. The necrotic tissue now omnipresent. The stench alone was enough to drop me, but coupled with the mere sight of it, I nearly fainted. I spent a good 5 minutes crawling back to the center of the chamber, now struggling feverishly to remain conscious. I considered just getting the hell out of there, just leaving that unholy pit behind, never to return, never to talk about it. But I knew once again that I couldn't. I had to see it through. I had to put that bastard behind bars. Nothing else mattered. I struggled to my feet once again, staggering towards the final cell, all the while trying to mentally prepare myself for whatever was waiting. But no manner of preparation would have been enough for what I saw next. I fell to my knees, and for the first time, I screamed bloody murder. It was me. I mean, it wasn't, but at the same time, it most certainly was. It was a young man, identical to me in every aspect. He was strapped to an operating table, just like the rest, but it was hoisted to a vertical position, leaving the tortured victim hanging upside down. Strange sigils were carved into his flayed flesh, and ponds of blood surrounded the table. There is no way to imagine the pain that he must have been in, the torment of it all. And as he sat there trembling, I could see tears running from his eyes. He was conscious. Something subtly fell into place in my mind. I got up to my feet and I ran back to the other cells, haunted by this new horrendous, ghastly notion. It took a bit of time, but I had to be sure. And I was. There was no denying it. They were all me. I don't know how long I was out, but as the realization hit me, I fell to the floor like a sack of flour. My mind simply not capable of handling the horrendous nature of what I had found. I woke up in a daze, my body sore and numb, my head pounding like crazy. It took me a few minutes to sit up straight, and quite a few more to recall everything that had happened. The patients, the subjects, the clones. As I sat there reliving the terror, it dawned on me how impossible it all sounded. Even with all of the evidence right there in front of me, there had to be some explanation, some answer that made sense. "Please," a hoarse voice whispered behind me. "Please, help me." I turned around instinctively, my eyes wide open in fear. It was coming from one of the cells. No, there was no way any of them were capable of talking. The damage that I had seen, the torture inflicted upon them, the pain that they had been in, the trauma of it all. How could anybody survive that? How could anybody retain their sanity after something like that? "Hurry," the voice murmured, "before he comes back." I crawled towards it, my strength fading rapidly. I wanted so badly to just leave, but there was something keeping me down there. Something more than just revenge or justice. I couldn't explain it. and I still can't. All I know is that I had no real choice. I was barely able to drag myself up against the cell door, resting the weight of my body on the thick glass structure. "Thank you," the young man whispered. "We don't have much time left." I still don't understand how he was able to talk with most of his face missing. It was a gruesome thing to witness, but out of respect or pity, I couldn't find it in me to turn away. His eyes were clear, but his entire body was shivering. He had to have been in some sort of condition of utter shock. I think he wanted some sort of response from me, but I couldn't find the words. What could I say? Where could I even begin? "It's all right," he whispered. "I know it's bad. Very bad. I started. "I can't. I don't know." "I'm glad you got out," he said. "But you should have stayed away." Get out? What did he mean? I just stared at him quizzically, my mind struggling to make sense of the words. I could see doubt fill his eyes. His gaze shifted erratically. "You don't know, do you?" he whispered strenuously. "He got into your head, didn't he?" "Look, I don't know what you mean," I said. "I don't understand what you're saying." He coughed horribly, slime quickly filling up in his mouth. He spat it out onto his chest, the red-brown discharge slowly dripping down to the floor. I felt sick to my stomach. "I don't know what he did to you," he said, his voice now clearer. "But you need to run." "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what the hell is going on," I spat angrily. He groaned in pain, and I immediately regretted my rather angry tone. There was no way for me to understand the torment that he has suffered, and I knew that. "Look, I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "You were here," he said. "In the empty cell. You got out 2 weeks ago." "No, that's impossible," I said. "I've never been down here before." "He did something to you. Something with your memory. Something with your head." Was he talking about my father? Who else could it be? I was convinced that it was the insane ravings of a mad person. The pain probably pushed him over the edge ages ago. And yet, there was something else. Something on my mind. I ran my fingers through my hair, trying my best to process the words. And that's when I felt it. At the back of my head. It felt like a bump at first, but the more I felt it, the clearer it became. It was a scar. A surgical scar. It was still sore and I could still feel the stitches. "What the hell?" I yelled. "No, this can't be real." "Look at your clothes," the man said. "Look at what you're wearing." I did, and I looked down, expecting to see jeans and a leather jacket. Instead, I saw rags, tattered and torn, stained with dirt and blood, clad on a pale, frail and bruised body. This wasn't me. This was somebody else. I lost my balance and I fell to the floor, the shock of the revelation too much to handle. "It's called a shared life experience," a deep and familiar voice called from the darkness. I was barely able to turn my head, the fragility of my newfound existence too real, too tangible. I was expecting to see him, my father, that utter bastard. But instead, I was treated to another jolt of shock as a pale light suddenly beamed from above, illuminating the stranger. "Such a weak phrase, it doesn't really do it justice, you know." He smiled at me. That was my smile. That was my body. And those were my clothes. It suddenly dawned on me. There wasn't just an empty cell. There were 2 empty cells. What you've been experiencing isn't really your memories, he said coldly. They're mine. I shook my head. No way. I knew who I was. I knew myself. This was some trick. Some crazy hallucination, maybe. You know it's true. He smiled again. But I can prove it if you would like. Tell me, what's your name? My name? What did he mean? I raised myself up with the little strength I had left, ready to end this insane charade. But I couldn't. I could not remember it. My name, it was all a blank. You can't remember it because you were never given one, he said. You are 4. That's all. These lads are 1, 2, and 3. He pointed to the occupied cells. And I am 5. My head was exploding. With pain, with confusion, with madness. None of it was true. It couldn't be, and how could it be? I fell to my knees again. Father, I said weakly. I remember my father. No, you don't, he laughed. That's not our father. He was our caretaker, an overseer. You've only met your father once, when you were 5. Old Joseph never really was much of a family man. I felt my memory slipping away, fading into obscurity. I tried to hold on to it, to them, but I failed miserably. Instead, I remember the pain, the torment, the torture. Strapped down, blinking in and out of consciousness. A life imprisoned. You're like me, 5 said. Not like them. You endured. You never gave up. I knew that you had it in you. And that's why I let you share. And that's why I released you. But why? I said weakly, my voice trailing off. What? 5 bent down and stroked my hair, his clean hands smelling faintly of soap. There was a darkness in his gaze, something that didn't belong, something not of this world. Because we don't die, he said. Have you seen them, the others? No one survives that, but we do. We're special quintuplets. And old Joseph loved watching our minds work. He recorded everything, ordered every procedure, measuring God knows what, until he eventually tired. I guess he had more interesting projects. But I remembered, and I learned. He gave me a pat on the back and started walking towards one of the empty cells. His stride was strong and elegant, a man filled with confidence and power. I'll tell ya, I don't miss this place, he said. I almost never come down here anymore. But how did you? I whispered. Get out? Oh, that. He smiled. They wanted to field test me. 11 years ago. Freaking brainwashed the shit out of me. I only came to my senses a few years back, and then I freaking killed that son of a bitch. The overseer, the fake father. I felt my strength returning to me. I didn't know how, but I was suddenly able to get back on my feet. My mind suddenly clear and alert. You feel better, don't ya? He said, smiling. They're waking up. I looked around me and he was right. They were all conscious, looking at us through those anguished eyes, tears streaming on their faces, bodies convulsing horribly. Why don't you free them? I spat angrily. Why are they still here? You're kidding me, right? He laughed. Have you seen them? There's no way back for them now and you know it. Sure, we don't die easily, but we don't magically grow back dead tissue. There are limits, and I keep them here to feed us strength. I've eased their pain as much as I can, while still keeping them breathing. We need them alive to find him. To find Joseph. I stared right into his hateful, dark gaze. He was insane, that much was clear. But there was something else in there. I was sure of it. "I won't let you do it," I said. "I won't leave them in here." "Yeah?" Five said. "What are you going to do about it?" What could I do about it? The question echoed in my mind. He was obviously much stronger than me, faster than me. His body not covered in wounds and not bruised. Not starved, not tortured. I shook my head in defeat. "That's what I thought." He laughed. "Now come. I found a man that has some answers." He started walking towards the ladder and ushered me to follow. I sighed deeply and I slowly dragged my feet in pursuit. He was staring up the shaft as I came up behind him. "Please," I heard two whispering. "Please don't." "Don't worry," I said as I raised my flashlight. "I'll come back for you." I hit Five in the back of the head with the collective strength of the remaining four of us, the strike cracking his head open like a melon. He fell to the ground with a loud thump, his body soon surrounded by a deep red pond of blood. I instantly felt weaker, his consciousness fading rapidly. I grabbed hold of the ladder, my feet barely able to move and my head aching terribly. "I'll come back," I whispered to my imprisoned siblings. "I promise." I don't know how I got up, but I firmly believe I was helped by my brother somehow. All I know is that I was barely conscious as I staggered out of the house, and that I must have collapsed on the street soon after. I woke up in a hospital bed several days later, feeling stronger than I'd ever felt in my life. I don't know what I should have done. Contacted the authorities, the police, the army. How could I trust any of them? Instead, I fled to the hospital the first chance that I got, and I returned to the house. Only it wasn't there. It was gone, leveled to the ground. I searched the debris for hours, until I found the approximate spot where there should have been a trapdoor. A shaft. But I found only concrete. Freshly poured concrete. I guess old Joseph wasn't done with us after all. I don't know where I'm going next. I don't know anything. I only know what I know through my brother. Through Five. He's still alive, and so are my brothers. They have to be right. All I know for sure is that I am free. After 25 years in captivity, I can move again.